Van Show. He's a monster on a mission to talk to lots of folks. Van Show. Van Show. Van Show. Van Show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Van Show. Thank you. We are so excited because today we have Tonia Ransom on the show. Say hello, Tonia.
Hello.
Hello. Well, we're so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
Are you?
I'm very excited. I'm talking to a puppet. How could I not be excited?
Oh, not only a puppet, but a monster puppet.
Yes, of course. And I'm a horror writer, so of course I love monsters.
All right. Now, Tonia, we want to learn about you. It is called the Van Show, but we want to learn about Tonia.
All right.
You know, everybody already knows about me. I'm old hat. So, Tonia, tell us where you're from.
I am originally from a town called Lindale, Texas.
So now we brought you on this show because you're an artist.
Yes.
And so I want to hear a little bit about how did you get started? When did you discover your love for the written word?
Well, I had an assignment in school in the second grade. We were tasked with writing and illustrating a picture book and actually making the book too. They gave us, chipboard and contact paper to cover it with and everything. And I wrote a story based on Michael Myers. It was basically Michael Myers fan fiction.
Oh my goodness.
So it was full of lots of blood and corpses and things that terrified my teacher. And I was a really good kid in school, and they called my parents all the time to say, oh, Tonia's so great. She's such a great student. We love having her, blah, blah, blah. And the teacher, of course, calls my mom when she reads this book that I wrote. And I thought, because I was a good kid, that she was just so impressed with my writing and illustrating abilities. But it turns out I scared her, just not in the way that I intended to, but I didn't realize it at the time. So I kind of got hooked on that feeling of scaring people and kept doing it. But now, I do it in a way that I actually intend to, not, frightening my teachers into thinking that I'm a psychopath.
So not only are you an author, but you also have created a podcast.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration for creating Nightlight?
Yeah. Okay. So I belong to a writers group, and it's all Black writers. And we were kind of talking. This study came out about how many stories were published in a year, and then it had a demographic breakdown of here's the race of the authors, ethnicity, that kind of thing. And about 2-point-something% of fiction published in that year of the study was published by Black writers.
What?
Yeah. And in America, Black people make up about 13% of the population. So obviously, massive gap there. And we had a conversation in our writers group saying, hey, why do we think this is happening? And we talked about when we get rejections, a lot of rejections are just, the story wasn't a good fit, that kind of thing. But a lot of the time, what we heard from these editors were, this story is too Black, or this story is not Black enough, or, they wanted it to be about slavery and it was about a haunted house. And, we were just really frustrated that, essentially these people who were not Black were telling us what Black people should be writing about. And so I wanted to start Nightlight to showcase Black writers and to show that we can write more than stories about slavery or the civil rights movement or segregation. We can just write a regular haunted house story, or a slasher, whatever. We are just as diverse as any other group of people.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to give Black writers an outlet for their work where they wouldn't be edited down because they needed to talk a certain way, or they couldn't talk too Black or not Black enough, kind of thing, and they could just write what they wanted to write and give people a place where they could find Black horror writers.
How long has the podcast been going on?
I started it in June 2018.
And how many episodes?
I think we're at 111 or 112.
Wow.
No? Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
A lot of episodes.
And so I imagine because you've been creating this, that it's allowed you to meet a lot of new authors that you didn't know before.
Yes. Yeah, that's my favorite thing about Nightlight, is that I've gotten to meet so many great authors. And it's really cool when I produce an episode and it gets published and the writer hears it for the first time and they're like, oh my God, I never imagined what my work could sound like produced. And so it makes them start also dreaming about, hey, maybe I can write a screenplay. Maybe I could start writing for Hollywood. Maybe I should start, pursuing that as a path, as well as writing books and short stories, because they get to imagine their story in a whole different way. They get to experience their story like they're just another member of the audience, and they learn a lot about themselves as a writer. And I mean, honestly, like having your work produced is a joy. Like it's exciting. It's not something that a lot of writers get to experience. So I'm really glad to be able to do that for the community.
Well, and hearing your words read by somebody else, they're going to put their own inflection in it and their own interpretation of it. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool kind of, it's a cool collaboration, like where you're hearing your words out of somebody else's brain.
Yeah. And we do all Black voice actors because, that's another thing is a lot of the authors that I've produced have had their stories produced by other podcasts, but say a white narrator read it and they don't quite get the intonation in the way that Black people speak a little bit differently. Like, the happy birthday song, like Black people have a special version of the happy birthday song. And there's a story on my podcast that has that was previously published somewhere else, and they didn't sing it right just because they were never experienced that part of the culture. And so, that author wrote to me and, just talked about how like it was great to have their work produced by that other place, but my production blew them away because it was closer to what they had envisioned when they wrote the story. It was more true to their experience.
I love that. Yeah, and I love that you've created this community space. Like, and you created it because you saw that there was a need for it. Like that there was not this space. It did not exist. And instead of you going, well, I wish someone would do this. I wish someone would make this thing happen. You did it.
Yeah. And honestly, like I wanted to start a podcast before podcasts were actually a thing. So a long time ago, in 1998, 1999, 2000.
The distant past.
Yes, the distant past. We had internet radio. They started basically broadcasting just, standard radio stations, but across the internet. And there was a station that replayed old-time radio shows. And at the time, I was a web developer. And if I listen to music while I work, I just start like singing the lyrics in my head, and I'm starting to dance and bop around, and I don't get any work done. Mm-hmm. Music distracts me. Stories, however, did not distract me, but it was a great way to because I have ADHD. So having something else for my brain to do while I was coding worked out really well for me. And so I found these stories and I started listening to old time radio, and I thought, wow, it'd be really great to bring old time radio back. But I was a web developer and there were no podcasts at the time. So I was like, well, I'm gonna have to somehow get in contact with some people at a radio station and somehow get them to give me lots of money. And I knew it was gonna be an uphill climb. And then podcasts came out and I was like, oh, okay, this is much easier. And I procrastinated and was like, oh, I'm so busy right now. I don't have enough time for this, or I don't have enough money. And I kept putting it off. And then finally in 2018, I was like, I just keep making excuses. I keep putting it off and I keep not getting it done. And by that time I'd had my son, and life isn't gonna get any easier. There's never gonna be a perfect time to do anything. You either decide to do it or you don't.
Yep.
And, I just kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I did a fundraising campaign because I wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to be like one of those hobbies where you lose tons of money.
Yeah.
And I raised enough money for I raised like $2,000, I think, almost. And I had no platform at the time. Like nobody knew who I was. I was in web development. I was not really writing professionally or anything at that point, but people were really interested in this idea that I had, and complete strangers gave me lots of money to do it. And, the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, well, and then it led to like another evolution, it seems, with Afflicted.
Yes, that's originally what I wanted to do, because I did want to bring back old time radio in that style of it's like TV for your ears, but I knew that I didn't have the resources to be able to fund something like that, because Nightlight is much cheaper to produce than Afflicted is. And Afflicted was kind of my dream come true. That was where I really wanted to go when I started Nightlight, and Nightlight was kind of a stepping stone for that. But I mean, I love running Nightlight for reasons that I didn't necessarily anticipate, but I also love doing Afflicted because I get to write for Afflicted.
Yeah, and so for those in the audience who aren't familiar with Afflicted, can you talk a little bit about what it is?
Yes. Okay, so it's told kind of in the style of American Horror Story, where there is a new set of characters and story every season, so you can, drop in on any season and you don't have to go back to season 1 to start. But it's probably best described as Lovecraft Country meets True Blood. It is really a love letter to the way that I was raised. So I was raised in the South, as a Black woman, and my family was very superstitious and into hoodoo, but we never called it that. My grandmother would say, okay, well, let's put red brick dust around the windows and around the doors. That, protects us from evil. And I thought it was just, like old Black people superstitious stuff, But, it turns out it had a name. I was writing my book, Risen, and I was researching this because the story that I was writing was about this woman who is raised from the dead, but like Haitian style kind of zombie.
Oh.
So not the brains kind of zombie, the one where, necromancer raises you from the dead and they are essentially puppeting you.
Yikes.
Yeah, not good. And
No.
I grew up with stories like that. My dad would tell me, that somebody's cousin's cousin, they knew somebody, that this happened to. And I mean, it's a big fear. It used to be a really big fear in the Black community. Like, that's the worst thing that could happen to you, is essentially becoming a slave to someone, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, growing up and hearing those stories as a kid, my dad also worked in a funeral home. That was his first job.
Extra creepy.
Out of school, and he would tell us funeral home stories too. So, all of that kind of came together, and I really wanted to put that into a story and talk about hoodoo and, this folklore that I was raised with that, was a part of me that I didn't have a name for until I was doing research.
Whoa. And then so now you make like full on radio plays with that story.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun. It's fun to talk to a puppet.
Well, it's fun to talk to a you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Van Show!